Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Work webinar series organized by the Center for Asia Leadership. My name is Faustino John Lim, and today's webinar is on work strategies for the new era, mastering on-camera leadership, communication, and influence with our speaker, Justin R. Hartley. If you are joining us for the first time, our center is an organization based out of Boston, United States, and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, operating in several cities across Asia. We were founded at Harvard University among fellows and alumni, and we are focused on helping leaders in Asia initiate change and manage progress in their organizations and communities. Wherever you might be, we have over 100 registrants from several countries, and we'd just like to welcome all of you here today. But joining us from Brisbane, Australia, Justin R. Hartley is the founder of Justin R. Hartley Communications. He is a leadership communications trainer and coach to former prime ministers and presidential candidates, a Fulbright Scholar and Kennedy Fellow at Harvard, and also former Guinness World Record holder in memory and an Australian memory champion. So Justin, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hi, John. Great to be with you. I'm doing really well, thank you. How about yourself?
Doing very well. Just super swamped these days. It seems like the situation in Malaysia is fluctuating with the COVID. How are things in Australia right now?
Much the same. We've had a few more cases reported in New South Wales today, Sydney particularly, and then also Victoria. Capital city Melbourne has experienced quite a large number of cases relative to Australia's total case workload. So yeah, it's tough here, but I know a lot of countries are doing it much harder around the world. So yeah, my thoughts and prayers to everyone around the world who are experiencing difficulties with COVID. I know it's very hard. But one thing I know about you, John, you always look very relaxed and very cool on camera.
Thank you, Justin. Today I'm feeling kind of self-conscious because I'm with a world-leading communications expert. So let's get right into it. So 2 questions will be addressed in today's webinar. So number 1 is, what shape will effective and collaborative communication take in our future workplace? And second, what strategies can be adopted to increase leadership effectiveness in this new environment? Okay, so Justin, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. And hello, everyone, wherever you may be around the world. I understand there may be around 15 countries tuned in today, so I know it's different time zones, but thank you very much for taking the time, and I hope that today's short session will give you something that you can take from today and you can put to good use in your workplace. As John mentioned, that first question I'd like to address now, and that is kind of looking essentially at the way we're changing our communication from face to group in the workplace, face-to-face communication, both of those in person. And there's a change, as we're all aware of, that's taking place and has been accelerated by COVID and the pandemic around the world. Now, not just in the recent year or so, but in the recent decade, there's been a large change in the way we work. And if you could summarize that in one short, succinct statement, is that we have more geographically dispersed workforces around the world. One of the main reasons we have that is because people are working remotely. A study recently showed that during the pandemic, Zoom actually found a 574 increase in usage within 2 months. So these are one of many studies just showing the absolute increase in online collaboration that's occurring around the world. We know this is happening in the pandemic, but interestingly, this has happened and has happened leading up to the pandemic as well. Another study showed there's a 400% increase in employees working from home at least 1 day a week in the last decade. So that change to how we work and how we deliver our work as a team is really important when we think about how do we become more effective in our leadership with whatever industry we're working in. The other interesting statistic is 30% of all full-time workers are now working from home, or 62% are working from home occasionally. So all of these trends, all of these studies at different countries around the world, they're all showing us the same thing, that it's becoming more acceptable and more, I suppose, common practice to be working from home for a company that you're currently employed by. Another part is looking towards the future, and another study shows in the next 3 years, up into 2022, remote work is forecast to increase 77%, whilst gig work, 19%. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of the term gig work, it's in relation to gig economy. And in a nutshell, the gig economy is that labour market that's comprised of workers and freelancers and crowdsourced workers, all those people who are essentially working for themselves. And so this is a change which is also contributing to the more geographically dispersed workforce. The gig economy actually comes from just an anecdote, it comes from the term where musicians go and play a gig somewhere. It's a short-term assignment, and so that's been adopted in this context. But importantly, it's not just one-of-a-kind experts, those at the top of their field. It does include those people, but it also includes people at the start of their career who are one of many people with the same skill sets. So the gig economy is encompasses a broad range of skills around the world. The key part to note is people are working independently. So there are benefits to us when we work in the gig economy because we have more autonomy over our work-life balance. From an organisational point of view, and this is also important, it's not just what's the benefit to us, it really benefits companies as well, because organisations can fill the short-term needs and short-term temporary skill gaps they may have in their workplace. Obviously, full-time employees and increasing full-time staff, it's a more onerous, I suppose, process for companies, more legal responsibility and so forth. So to get people in on a short-term basis with the requisite skills needed to fill those gaps can be really beneficial to companies. Our PwC workforce report showed that people are really valuing the autonomy and the generational shift is moving towards younger people who value that entrepreneurship and the ability to take specialist skills and then use them to their own desire and wish at different times and have the flexibility in their work-life balance to kind of, I suppose, contract those out to companies who need them. And you might think, well, this is just starting off. You know, how many people are out there? Well, there's a Harvard Business Review has found there's 150 million workers in North America and Western Europe already in the gig economy. So it's a massive amount of people, and forecasts are that this will continue to increase in future years. So what does this mean for us as leaders, as people who are working in our respective professions and who want to really achieve and be the best people we can become, both in personal and professional life? Well, the result is that we are now using more than ever video conferencing. And so video conferencing and digital skills is what I'm talking about today, and it's what's really important to focus on in becoming future ready. As I said before, it is an additional part of the communication process where we had more face-to-face and face-to-group communication in the workplace. There's now going to be more video conferencing, which will not replace that, but it'll be a complement to it. And so it's really important as people who want to achieve and become even better leaders that we spend time and invest our time and energy in improving our video conferencing skills. Because it's not just the same as talking face-to-face. Talking two-dimensionals is quite different. And so what I'd like to do today is just run through a framework which has been devised called the Video Leadership Framework. Looking at this framework will give you some tips and pointers how to become more effective leaders when you're actually communicating online. It's broken into 3 sections. The first is on-camera preparation, then on-camera performance, and finally on-camera follow-up. It follows the acronym Video Leadership. So each letter stands for something important to consider when you're actually on a video conference. So on-camera preparation, the first one, V. V is talking about vision, and it's important to prepare. Now, I know that's an obvious thing, and a lot of these pointers are not going to be revelations to you, but it's important to consider all of them because it's easily forgotten. If we prepare well, particularly on video conference, it will really show. Conversely, if we don't do our preparation, it's even more obvious on camera when it's not done properly. When we are prepared, it gives us a greater air of authority, more confidence internally, and it makes us become more competent, I think, to our colleagues. And overall, in terms of heading towards a certain goal, we are more effective and efficient in our workday. The second one, I, is infrastructure. Now, we all have different technical abilities. I know I can definitely improve my technical skills, but infrastructure is about having a competent knowledge of the technology you're using. What's the platform you're using? Is it Microsoft Teams? Is it Zoom? Whatever it may be, you don't need to be an expert, but make sure you understand the functionality, how it works, and how to troubleshoot if something comes up. Things like screen size, pixelation, and all of those just basic functionality aspects, important to understand, because if you don't get them right, it can be quite embarrassing. D stands for dress and appearance. And again, we all know we need to dress appropriately. On camera, again, it's something which really becomes it accentuates what we are wearing. So if we choose the wrong attire, as in me with this photo as an example here, if I was dressed like that today, you would probably give me less credibility on talking about this topic. So it's important to dress as you would face to face and make sure that you are looking professional at all times. The thing is, everybody's looking at you on camera. If you're sitting in a boardroom table environment, people are looking at different angles. So on camera is actually more critical to look better and be dressed appropriately, and to be, I suppose, aware of just little aspects about your appearance, whether it be jewelry that's maybe moving around or a watch that's banging as you touch the table that the computer's on. Those little things can really affect the impression people form. This is one example I picked out, and there's so many out there. And I do like to use news stories because journalists are a good source of examples for these errors that I'm talking about today and things where we can improve. This one journalist is a classic example. It's quite commonplace, I know, for people to be wearing a suit, perhaps on top, and maybe just more casual attire on the bottom. And so this poor gentleman here, he didn't check his camera position. He didn't look carefully about the dress and how that all lines up. And he's wearing, obviously, shorts or even something less there, and it's showing up on camera. Doesn't give a good look, doesn't give a good impression. And, after that news bulletin, I can guarantee people are just thinking about, I could see that guy's legs. Now, E stands for environment. Now, this is one of the most important parts of the video leadership framework. Environment is all aspects of everything that surrounds us on camera, including ambient sounds. So when I talk about environment, I'm talking about be cognizant of the room you're in, how big it is, the sounds and acoustics of that room, the color and decor, and any furniture that's showing up. Think in mind, what's on your desk? What do people see is on your desk? Is it flowers, photos, stationery? What's on the wall behind you? Is it a degree you may have earned? Is it artwork or clocks? But each thing that is in camera, think about it as, what does that tell the audience about you as a person and as you as a leader? Generally, I'd say keep things minimalist. Don't put too much in view, but be aware what is showing and what that means, and I suppose conveys about you as a person. I'd like to show you a very short video now that highlights some of these, I think, faux pas that have been picked up. I've picked up in some of the footage I've seen on TV and on YouTube, and I've put this little collage together to illustrate some of the errors that may come with people not being fully aware of the infrastructure, not dressing appropriately, or not having the correct environment around their computer. And you'll see different examples of this in the next 2.5 minutes or so.
Okay, just give us a few seconds. All right, great.
He kills viruses in just one. What did you do, Mom? Dad, holy crap!
Nothing like what we had yesterday where we had sunshine and temperatures. Oh, hi, honey.
Another Valley business is making changes to ensure the customer and worker safety. Starting today, White House Fruit Farm in Canfield is temporarily closing to walk-in traffic.
Hey, good morning. I want to show you a live look here. This is Concord Road, 31, and
at I-65. Gonna go ahead and apologize. My Alexa is going off. Alexa, off. You know, just what you get for working from home.
Wow.
Try to get to Paul in just a little bit, and we'll be right back after this.
A lot's changed in the last couple of weeks, and one of the things that I've learned is to just cut myself a little bit of break. There's not a lot of traditional learning going on in that classroom, but that's not to say that my kids aren't learning valuable lessons. We've been having fun doing.
So joining us this morning is the social and emotional program instructor for that program, Hannah Hotchkiss, with information about all of these classes. Good morning, Hannah. Hannah, can you hear us? Good morning. I'll try one more time. Hannah, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Hannah?
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing? It looks like we were having a little bit of an audio issue there. How are you this morning?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
Pardon me.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited.
Okay.
Justin, are you wearing shorts or pants?
I'll leave that to your imagination, John, but I can guarantee you won't see down past my waist. I think personally I like to dress professionally, and so to be fully attired, I think, well, for me it's a state of mind. But it doesn't matter if you do wear shorts or not. It just means to be fully aware that you're on camera, so don't stand up or do something that will reveal that. And I think that's an important part to consider. Look, that does have some obviously lessons for everybody, and there are some funny and amusing segments there. The point is, though, that as we become more used to video conferencing, those sorts of errors won't be as well tolerated. And even though we laugh, we do remember them, and it does reflect on the person who is involved in that particular segment. So the point here is to consider the environment carefully, because it does reflect on you as a person, as a leader, more than you realize. This is a photo I just wanted to show you as well. When I'm talking about the environment, and I talked about having a minimalist background, this is a gentleman who actually, in terms of camera position, he's done quite well. He's in the middle of shot. He's wearing a nice, relatively nice suit, I think, and he looks professional. But when you look at the environment around him, he's at home, but it's cluttered. It's very, very much distracting, and our focus is taken to all the things around him rather than perhaps what he would be saying. If we look at the left of him on camera, we can see he's got his table there with lots of knickknacks on. There's a coffee machine. There's things hanging off the wall like a calendar and some photos, books and so forth. If you notice on the bottom left, there's two cats fighting on the floor, and I think that would be very distracting during the video. On the right-hand side, he's got his coffee cup and then a TV in the background, which actually has him on camera. So that would be an example of absolutely no-no. It's far too convoluted, too many things in picture, and it's to show you that it can be really distracting when you're wanting to discuss something. Okay, so now we move on to the next part, which is looking at the lighting. And the lighting is also something that's really important with the environment. I've used a couple of fairly unprofessional photos of myself here, just to show you how bad it can be. But when people are actually on camera and not considering the light, this is something I regularly see in video conference calls, that they're not considering the shadows that they create and how that affects the actual appearance on camera. Here, this is a classic sign where people have got light on one side of the room but not the other, and the lighting is really important. So I suggest there to make sure you have a lamp or something that can illuminate the room and your face fairly equally so this doesn't happen. The on-camera position is also very important, and O stands for that. It's important to make sure that you have a fairly full, your presence in the shot is rather full. So I would say within half to 2/3 of the screen is your head, shoulders, and upper torso. Some people will have the screen too big and they're appearing in the bottom corner of the screen. Or, this is a classic example I see probably more than most, people looking down to their camera, which is well below their chin. So it's really important when we're looking at the camera to have the camera itself horizontal to our eye level. So we're not looking up someone's nose, we're not looking down at their maybe thin, receding hairline, but it's important to make sure that you actually have a very good, clear shot of the person, well lit, and it's in the middle of the screen. These are two big no-nos. And L stands for lead up. With respect to actually having your meeting, whatever it may be, again, the more preparation you conduct, the more effective and efficient that meeting will be. People are so busy today with lots of different engagements. We have meeting after meeting. So the more you can prepare people for that meeting, the better it is. So many meetings I see, and I've seen examples of this on YouTube, people coming to the meeting 4 minutes late, 5 minutes late, then they're going over the same information again. People are saying, what are we talking about today? It's important that you can distribute a clear agenda to people. They're aware of what's going to be discussed. And also that the meeting notes are very clearly segmented so that you can refer to it and everybody can turn to that section and is on the same page. Unlike a boardroom situation, live, it can be harder to follow things on screen. So the more preparation you can do leading up to that, the more effective the meeting will be. Now, turning to on-camera performance. So E stands for engagement and execution. Make sure you confirm who is in the meeting. The house rules are given very clearly so people know how the meeting will be run. And then I always recommend don't have people in the meeting who are not going to be contributing or are not needed. The fewer people in the meeting, the better. If you have everyone involved, a lot of people aren't actually there to contribute, it can make it a much harder thing to run. So make sure the people who are there are actually in attendance. The other thing I would say is to engage people early, even if it's just a few seconds of an icebreaker. Getting people to talk and contribute early means they're more likely to contribute during the meeting. We all have different personality types. Some people like talking more than others, and it can be quite overwhelming for some people in a meeting when they don't actually say anything to start with. They end up saying nothing during the meeting. And if you have people in the meeting who are able to contribute, make sure you give them the opportunity to do so. And lastly, always allow time at the end in a video conference to summarize what you've discussed and to make sure that nothing's left unsaid. Now, asking questions is also critical because we all have, as I say, busy lives and time is limited in a video conference. So I suppose the quality of the question that's asked is really key to getting the quality information back. So when you're thinking of a question, make sure it's clear to the people, make sure it's complete, it has all the information that's required, and keep it as short as possible. The other thing is to ask open-ended questions. Again, this is a common thing people know, but people sometimes just don't practice this skill, and it's quite easy for questions to come back with answers of yes and no. So where those responses aren't necessarily the only options, ask open-ended questions that gets respondents to talk openly about something, so to give more information. Now, D stands for demeanor, and I think I've mentioned this earlier, but when you're on video, everybody's looking at you. So your demeanor and how you behave, your poise, your energy is all very much magnified. So always be careful and cognizant that the camera is on you. Even when you're not talking and you're listening, the camera's still watching. And one example I can give you is that a friend of mine in LA was telling me that he was in a meeting where there was some serious negotiations about a contract with his company and another one. And the legal teams were both talking. On camera, the guy wasn't actually talking at this moment, but he was still on camera. He gave a very, I suppose, bad response to what someone was saying. He pulled a face. And that very action of him pulling the face, something like this, ended negotiations and they walked out. And they actually did come back and renegotiate the next week. But that was enough just to end the meeting because they didn't like the response. So when you're listening to someone, be very careful that your face doesn't show something you don't want to be seen by others on camera. in many ways, being in a video conference, you need to be more alert, I would say, than actually being there in person. E stands for empathy. Now, empathy is a skill that's not easily mastered. On video conference, I think it's even harder because we can't see people, we can't touch them, and we can't smell them. I mean, the whole aspect of the senses that are invoked when we're actually talking to someone face to face, you don't get that same sense when you're actually on a two-dimensional screen. So being empathetic is really important to judge people fairly and to listen to what they're saying. Try to think of it from their side, their perspective, before giving your response. And on that notion, responding is also very important. When people are talking to you, don't do what some people do, is just stare like this. No response. Others look around, they're bored, perhaps they don't want to engage, and that's really obvious. What's important is to actually look at the person, to nod every few seconds, and to smile, to understand what they're saying, to show that you're engaged and to show you're understanding and listening to what they're talking about. And I would say when you're giving a response, it's very rare that you need to speak for more than 60 seconds. So one mistake people often make, in my experience, is they talk too long and people then tune out and it becomes quite laborious. So keep your answers concise, and that's very important to keep people engaged and keep the meeting productive. And as I said before, keeping your eyes, not only having the camera below you, but people then look at the camera or they look at the screen when they're talking. And I think you'll all relate to this. I'm now looking at the camera and hopefully you're seeing me look at you. But if I was to do this most of the time, I'm looking at myself on the screen, you can see the difference in my head. I'm looking down at the camera and it's not as engaging as looking right at the camera and looking at you. So this is not an easy skill to master for many people, but always focus on the camera when you're talking. And unlike in face-to-face communication, you really don't want to move your gaze away from the camera. It should always be focused at the camera when you're speaking. And again, that's a key difference between talking face-to-face. H stands for hands, eyes, and facial expressions. Really important. Good communication is about having expression in your hand gestures, in your face, in your eyes. So remember that, again, that's being magnified when you're talking. Hands, really important. On camera, we don't have the full use of our body to move and we're more restricted in our movements overall. So I tell people to make sure that your hands don't come above your chin because it's easy for the hands to start doing this and you're covering your face. That's a no-no. Keeping your hands moving, even if people see part of your hands moving, they get the idea. But keep them below your chin, above your waist, but try to make sure the camera can pick up some of those hand movements. And again, your facial expressions, magnified on camera, keep those aware what you're doing in terms of your facial expressions in responding to people. And the other thing I would say is, depending on your audience, but particularly when you're talking about collaboration across countries with people from different cultures and perhaps different first languages, slow down your speech. Talking very quickly makes it harder for people to follow the conversation, particularly online. So making a very clear mark that you want to slow down what you're talking about will help things become clearer for everybody and not ask people to keep asking you to repeat a message. This is an example of just talking about. I see this on camera regularly, hands coming up over the face. Very distracting. People see a bird fly past the window, they look over and they're looking at it. You notice the head, you notice the head turn, and it really, even though the person may not mean it, it may come across that they're not interested and people get offended. And so it's very hard to, I suppose, match those intentions at times with what the recipient's taking, because it's only part of the picture you're seeing. And when you see someone's head look out the window, they can give the wrong message. We're almost at the end now. I stands for influence, negotiation, and conflict resolution. This is a really in-depth topic. And so all I'll say here is that when you're talking about something which is a really hard conversation, which a lot of these are, particularly negotiating and resolving conflict, the skills that I've mentioned so far, again, become magnified. So really keep those different aspects in mind when you're going into negotiations, when you're going into difficult conversations with people. The two-dimensional aspect of video conferencing makes it harder in many ways to communicate effectively. It doesn't mean we can't be as effective. It just means we need to invest time and energy to have those skills commensurate level that are as effective on video as they are in person. And so what I would say there is to take time, consider what you want to say, make sure you don't speak without thinking, because one thing with video conferencing is often recorded. So what you do, what you say, how you behave is there permanently. Okay, so always keep that in mind. And lastly, on-camera follow-up. So at the end of the meeting, make sure that you talk about what you've actually discussed, what's been covered, and importantly, what's been agreed. And then what are the next steps? Don't let people finish the meeting without knowing what's happening next. Make sure you're very clear as to next steps, next actions that are going to be taken, and clarify any points. And focus on the positives too, the positive takeaways, any lessons learned, constructive lessons that can be learned from the meeting. And be polite. I always say be polite, even if it's a tough conversation where you're disagreeing. Always thank participants for their time and contribution and end on a positive note. So all of those letters stand for video leadership. I think the more you practice thinking about those points in lead up to your video conference while you're actually conducting those as leaders or even participants and then following up, you'll become more effective leaders and better communicators in video conferencing. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today, John. I know it's a very short time frame, but hopefully we can use the remaining time for Q&A.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Justin. That's an excellent, succinct framework, video leadership, and it's, of course, original to you. So right now, we already have a couple questions from Anthony as well as Alvin. So let's put Anthony on the line.
Okay.
Just give us a few seconds, Justin. All right.
Hi, Anthony. Are you there?
Hi, Anthony.
Yes, yes, sir. Good morning.
Just introduce yourself and share your question to Justin. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good morning. I'm Anthony Salazar from the Philippines.
Hi.
Good day, sir.
Good day.
Sir, being mindful with your body language during long hours of webinar is a virtue, isn't it? Is there any study about the length of webinar or to minimize the fatigue of the attendees?
That's an interesting question. Thank you for that, Anthony. I think one thing I'd say first up is body language is a key communication skill that I train very heavily in, and I encourage people to always work on. So what I would say is the body language that I ask people to be aware of and to practice needs to be authentic, which means the body language you convey should be the same in person and on video. So the body language really shouldn't change too much, because the more you practice it, it's almost then an involuntary thing. But in terms of fatigue, and if I read your question correctly, understand you correctly, Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong. When you're sitting in a chair and you're staring at a camera for a long period of time, it actually can be quite fatiguing. And I know that for a fact, particularly in training courses. And so the one thing I would say to minimize that fatigue is to take, if it's a long video, and I would say, you know, if you're talking about more than an hour and a half, try to take a short break or encourage the participants to have at least a 5-minute break to give yourself a chance to stand up and stretch and just get a cup of tea or a glass of water. It's not healthy to have a really long meeting, 2 to 3 hours without a pause. So that's one thing I'd say. The second part is really be aware of, and again, this is the environment, having a ergonomically good chair. You know, we're sitting down for a long period of time. It's also a health aspect as well. So it's important to make sure that you're comfortable in your chair. Not only that, but one thing I also say to people is if you're going to get a swivel chair, okay, this affects how you actually come across potentially on camera. So I would generally say for those with probably not as much experience on video, get a fixed chair that doesn't swivel. Because I often see when people get bored or fatigued, they start to move around like this, okay? And that again becomes quite distracting. And if they might shift position, they end up here, it affects the whole way they're actually coming across. So making yourself comfortable, make sure the room is cool enough for you, it's not too hot. Those sorts of things will help you be comfortable, but take breaks as well.
Thank you very much. That's a clever idea, Justin. Thank you.
I think ideally on the sessions that we've been doing, Justin, we've seen we've got the most positive feedback for at least 40 minutes. Have at least like 5 minutes break. At least that's in our experience. So we have next question. Who do we have, Miriam? Alvin. Okay, so let's put Alvin on the line. Please introduce yourself and share your question to Justin.
Thanks, John. Hi, Justin. My name is Alvin Ng. I'm from Sunway University, Malaysia. I believe you've been here a couple of times.
I have. It's a great university. Yeah, it's always a pleasure being there.
Yeah. Well, my question is not so much about your acronym, which I think is great. I'm so happy to have heard from you today. I'm really interested in this whole concept of gig economy. As you were talking about it, I was just imagining, if more and more people are just doing gigs, there might be less, permanent workers for organizations that are a bit more traditional and they don't really engage so much in gig players. So I'm wondering if, gig economy would impact on existing organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. I think one part of the gig economy is that initially I think a lot of people went into gig economy from perhaps forced redundancies, and that may have started around about the time when the global financial crisis took hold, and that was late 2008, 2009. Going ahead, I think, organizations, I say, they benefit from the gig economy too. So human resource department, whilst they will have heavily involvement in full-time employees, they'll also need to be very much fully engaged in who they contract with organizations to fill those skills gaps. So I think human resources will always still be a very important role. I think the number of human resource personnel pretty much, I don't think would change rapidly. In terms of the actual number of staff working for organizations, I think invariably that will probably decline in the future. But I don't think that will necessarily be a bad thing, because the people that would come through, perhaps in those organizations, will instead be in the gig economy. So overall, I think, Alvin, the employment of people may actually increase, because studies show generally happier. Those in the gig economy are generally happier at work. They get that autonomy and flexibility I talked about, and they can then contract their services out to a number of companies. Mm-hmm. So those companies that maybe have reduced their full-time staff, they also have a lot of different connections with these experts around the world. And that opens up a whole range of other aspects to collaborating within companies, and also then building collaborations with people who aren't fully employed with companies. So it's a whole another area which is really important in getting the most out of teams collectively. Some of those teams will be working full-time, others will be working in the gig economy, and importantly, some will be in a hybrid situation where they're working in the company, but they'll be working partly from home and then partly within the company. So yeah, look, I think generally it's very favourable for both organisations and individuals.
Oh, thanks, Justin. That's great insight. I'm now very encouraged to try out being a gig guy, and well, maybe I can talk to Sunway University and see how they can contribute to my happiness. Thank you, Justin.
Maybe I can give you some advice on that, Alvin.
Thanks, John. Looking forward to it.
All right, just contact me. All right, so we have Keng Sheng Chu. So Keng Sheng, you're on the line. Please introduce yourself and then share your question to Justin.
Hi, Justin. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Right. Yeah, all right. I'm actually a medical lecturer here in one of the public universities in Malaysia. My question is just that how valid and how reliable high-stake interviews conducted using video conferencing apps would be. Say, for example, in the corporate world, interviews for the purpose of hiring someone for important positions, or in my case, interviewing students for placement and so on. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I think overall, I would say that video conferencing is here to stay. And so, many people are using that now for interviewing future employees or students. The one thing I would say, if I'm being brutally frank, I think face-to-face interviews, you can't beat that. And the reason I say that is when you're seeing someone face-to-face, you see their entire body, you can really gauge all the body language at once. You get to see a lot more of their reaction, and you get a sense of them in person. that at this stage can't be replicated in a video conference. Now, I know there's talk about holograms and maybe 3D projections in time, but with 2D, there is a limitation in comparison to face-to-face. Having said that, I think with a well-crafted, prepared interview on camera, you can still get a very good and full sense of a candidate. And so I would not discourage people using the video to get people to be interviewed on. I think it is becoming a lot more commonplace now around the world. And I would say, yes, it's becoming part of the culture. Rather than not use it, I think practice the skills that I've talked about here to get people to then respond, and you can gauge them as people. Ultimately, I think the body language is key, but also asking them those questions that will bring out a full answer and you can really understand who they are as people. That message, the public speaking, the actual words used will be exactly the same as in person. So I think rather than forgetting video, use it to improve the skills of the leaders and those interviewing in the organisation, and you will get good results, and equally good results as in face-to-face.
Yeah, if I may follow up, because one of my concerns is that a large chunk of the communication is communicated through a non-verbal languages. Yeah,
absolutely. And look, that's at this stage, I say you can't replicate that, and it's good to be open about that. You know, when people sit face to face in front of you, as you know, you can see how they're sitting with their legs and other aspects that you can't see on camera. And so you're only seeing part of me now. If you saw my full kind of body movement in relation to talking, then it gives you a little bit of a different message. But having said that, look, it's still very good. And I think, I would encourage people to keep practicing using the videos. Also, as you know, I mean, it's something which is, in terms of flexibility, the video conference and being able to do that can maybe capture a much broader net of candidate. So rather than them coming in initially face-to-face and they can't do that, you'll never interview them. If you can interview them on camera, you might get a much better quality candidate, and then you can negotiate how they work from that point forward.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have our last individual. The name is Sai Hup Tan. You actually have two questions, right, Sai Hup?
Yes, John, yes.
Introduce yourself and share your question.
Okay. Thanks, John. Hi, Justin. I'm Sai Hup. I'm Sai Hup from the Malaysian Investor Relations Association, where investors' communication is one of the critical factor of listed companies communicating with the public and investors. So I have two questions here. Number one is we run regular sessions online now. Those days we were very much on physical. The first question is nowadays when we do a lot of online sessions, right? Sorry, I missed out the question. What is the ideal duration for a video presentation? We are now doing mostly at 3 hours, and generally we would give a break. How long would be the break? I think you mentioned about 5 minutes earlier. Would it be enough for a 3-hour session? And would you think a full day video presentation is effective and advisable? That's the first question. The two question is that we are also doing conferences where you'll be on stage on a more wider space area where full body will be involved rather than the usual sitting down sessions. So what would be your pointers would you give for a person who's doing a full day, full body presentation to a large group? These are my two questions. Thanks, John. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Sai. And so the second part of the question, can I ask, is the presentation full body to just the camera, or is there an audience as well?
It'll be only a small audience, but if you're a live camera shooting at the persons presenting with the video with the stage, and a small group at the live audience. But it'll be streamed live to a larger audience.
Okay, they're great questions. Thanks, Sai. I think the first question, I would say, if it's a 3-hour presentation, it's important to have breaks, and I would say 5 minutes, but perhaps 10 minutes. We did some courses recently, John, didn't we, where it was a few hours, and what we would do was have at least one coffee tea break, perhaps 2. And so I'd say, I think John's also conveyed that for every hour, maybe have a 10-minute break thereabouts, just to keep people fresh and moving around. That's what I would recommend. If it's a 2-day course, then I think, certainly if that's the only time that you can fit everything in, it has to be 2 days. By all means, it can be done. One thing I would say is that we generally, when we're memorizing and paying attention to things, our brains only focus for a limited period of time and then they do drift. So I would think firstly, chunking things in different sections is really important, and then having the breaks even between that. Now, when I say a break, it doesn't necessarily mean a tea break. I would suggest doing things that break up the attention. So rather than me talking for a long period of time, I might speak, and then we might go into breakout rooms and people then can talk amongst themselves, or we might have a poll, or we might have a quiz, or there might be a video that's presented that just breaks up the monotony of someone talking the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very effective way to keep people's attention for, a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to talking in a large audience online and then a small audience live, I think it's important to treat the camera as a person as well. So looking at the audience is important, but also looking directly at the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you have such a large audience, it's very good to have a very good supportive team around you that can also do any technical issues that need to be conveyed during that presentation. They can maybe give a different angle to things and just help you if you need to present something at a certain time or play videos and so forth. So overall, the full body is actually an advantage. If you can be on camera presenting to an audience online and you have your full body shown, then I would say be exactly the same as you are to the audience live, but treat the camera as another person and look at them, that person, the camera, more often.
Mm-hmm.
And be aware of any questions that people would have in the online world as well, and to address those along the way. But look, it's a great opportunity. I think that's a really good way to do it. In many ways, standing up and presenting is an advantage over what I'm doing right now, talking, sitting down.
Great.
These are great questions.
They are very good questions.
Justin, do you have time for perhaps one more? I will try to make it very quick. We're actually over time, but can we put Debbie on the line?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, this will be the last one.
Okay.
Hi, Justin. Thank you for this session. My name is Debbie. I'm from Malaysia. I would like to say I'm a gig worker, right? So I do deal with different clients, and due to the COVID situation, a lot of them are working from home full time. So we do have regular calls and whatnot rather than going to their office to meet them. So I do find that with some clients, they would prefer, probably because they're working from home the whole day, they're not dressed up and whatnot. So they prefer not to turn on the camera when we have a discussion, even though it's a scheduled discussion, right? So my question is, should I mirror or take the cue from them, as in I also don't turn on my camera when I talk to them, or should I insist that they turn on, or should I just turn on and let them do what they want to do? Right? I mean, for better engagement and to be able to have better conversation with them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, there's no easy answer to that, Debbie. I think it's always good when they say in body language, in terms of connecting with people, it's good to mirror what the other person's doing. So I think if the person who's a client potentially feels uncomfortable being on video camera during the day, for whatever the reason may be, they're at home and in casual attire, they may feel more comfortable if you're not on camera as well. And so in a sense, that becomes a telephone call, doesn't it? And so, that is the way forward. I think the question is then, if you're sharing information or you have presentations you want to talk through, how do you do that? It might be on email. It still might be on the collaborative platform, but you just have the video turned off. Hopefully, I would say try to encourage them to do a video conference. But if they are, quite reluctant to do it, certainly don't push it. And my overall recommendation would be to reflect what they're doing. And so I would take the video off as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, thanks for that question, Debbie. So unfortunately, we're out of time. We're actually already over time. Thank you so much for being generous with your time, Justin.
You're welcome.
So just with some final announcements, you can join us for a new episode of our webinar series next week with Neha Bansal. She's a Harvard MPA, also a researcher on the rise of Asia. And she's going to talk about, can Asians think? How we can develop creative minds to build Asia's future, based on her research at the Ash Center at Harvard. It's going to be next week, October 15, 11 a.m. Singapore time, and the registration link is in the post-webinar survey. And if you are interested in bringing a program to your organization, we have topics on adaptive leadership, futures thinking, becoming a professional thinker, strategic foresight. Justin does webinars and sessions on persuasion, power, and influence, as well as storytelling, as well as on negotiation. And our next announcement, if you are interested in purchasing any of our series on Rethinking Asia and also Asia Leadership Institute, you can go to asialeadership.org /publication. Rethinking Asia 7, one of the actually several of the copies are right behind me, but Justin, of course, is one of the contributing authors for this particular book, where he shares much more in detail with several cases and examples on his video leadership framework. And also, we want to inform you about our upcoming third Asia Leadership Forum, which is going to be online. The theme is The World After COVID, How to Lead Adaptively Beyond the Crisis, where we will have several speakers from around the world, several of them Harvard faculty, Harvard professors, who will share on the topics of adaptive leadership, on futures thinking, embedding innovation in your organization during a crisis, strategic influence, and also personal and self-leadership as well. And finally, do connect with us. So Justin has been very generous in sharing his contact details in case you want to reach out to him. You can also follow him on LinkedIn, and do follow us on our social media handles as well. You can visit our website, also our LinkedIn. My details are also here on Twitter as well as Instagram. So in case you want to see different stories and adventures of our time in Asia. So thank you so much. Wherever you are in the world, if you're on the other side of the world, have a great evening. If you are on this side of the world, have a great rest of the day. Just stay safe. Stay safe.
Say one thing. Oh, sorry, John.
No worries. Just stay safe. And just do fight the good fight of making our organizations, our communities, our families stronger during this time. And Justin, maybe I'll give you the last word, and then we can close it.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure to speak to you all today. I want to thank Samuel, the president of the Center for Asia Leadership, and thank very much John for moderating another wonderful session, and to the team, Anne and Miriam, for all their hard work. And also thanks everyone for participating. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe and well, and we might cross paths again. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.